Director Sam Raimi's Drag Me to Hell isn't technically one of his Evil Dead movies. There's no Bruce Campbell, no Necronomicon, but it feels like it's set in the same world as the Evil Dead franchise. There's demons, possession, over-the-top fight scenes, disgusting sight gags, and it's all mixed with a strong dash of humor. Drag Me to Hell may not be as popular as its Evil Dead cousins, but it's a great horror movie in its own right, and it's time for it to be revisited.
Nice hearing from you, Carlos.
After directing 3 Spider-Man movies in a row, Sam Raimi needed to take a breather. Spider-Man 4 was in development. It wouldn't end up getting made, but a script was in progress at the time. And before he got to that sequel, he wanted to do something different. He wanted to go back to his roots. His career had started off in the horror genre. The Evil Dead was his feature debut after all, and now it was time to return to horror. He and his brother Ivan had written a 30-page short story in 1989. It centered on a young woman named Stephanie Brown, although by the time the story became a movie, she was renamed Christine. Christine has moved from a Midwestern farm town out to Los Angeles, and she's aiming to reinvent herself. She's lost weight, she's working on getting rid of her accent, she has a successful, wealthy boyfriend who works as a professor, and she has a job at a bank working as a loan officer. She's aiming to win a promotion to become assistant branch manager, which could be a great boost to her personally, but would also impress her boyfriend's judgmental parents. She just has to prove that she's capable of making tough decisions. Unfortunately for her, she picks the wrong person to get tough with. An elderly woman named Sylvia Ganoush comes into the bank to ask her for a 3rd extension on her mortgage.
Will you help me?
She's fallen on hard times because she's dealing with medical bills. But Christine doesn't take pity on her. She denies the extension request, and Sylvia is going to lose her home. That night, the old woman attacks Christine in the parking garage. Their tussle ends with the woman tearing a button from Christine's coat and putting a curse on it. The Curse of Lamia. For 3 days, Christine will be tormented by this demonic spirit, and then she will be dragged to hell. Sam and Ivan turned their short story into a screenplay in 2002, the same year that the first Spider-Man was released. At that time, Sam didn't intend to direct the film himself. He was going to produce it through his newly formed company, Ghost House Pictures, and choose a different person to direct it. The problem was, if someone else directed it, it would have to be made on a lower budget. Studios would put more money into the project if the guy who made Spider-Man directed it himself. The Raimis tried to figure out how to cut down the script for a lower budget. But Sam realized that he didn't want to do that. He wanted to make Drag Me to Hell exactly as it was when they first wrote it. So after Spider-Man 3 was released in 2007, he decided that Drag Me to Hell would be his next movie. The film had a budget of $30 million, not small, but far below the budgets of Raimi's Spider-Man movies. And low enough that he would have complete creative freedom. There was no studio interference, no negotiating ideas with executives. Raimi even had Final Cut. And he found it very refreshing to be working on an original project with a lower budget. Comparing the experience of making Drag Me to Hell to working on his bigger movies, he told Cinema.com,
"This is much more hands-on, no department heads to deal with, just the actors and the technicians, and it's much more rewarding, I think."
Raimi assembled a strong cast for his new movie, but he did lose his lead on the way to production. The now named Elliot Page, fresh off earning an Oscar nomination for starring in Juno, was initially cast as Stephanie in Drag Me to Hell, then had to drop out due to scheduling issues. So Raimi made a call to Alison Lohman, who had received a lot of attention and accolades for her roles in movies like White Oleander, Matchstick Men, and Big Fish. Raimi and Lohman had a 4-hour conversation about the project, and during his phone call, the director warned Lohman that he was going to put her through hell, but she signed on anyway, and once they were on set, he proved to be true to his word. Lohman was the one who suggested changing the character's name from Stephanie to Christine. The name Christine just seemed more fitting to her, and Raimi went along with it. Lohman had never seen Raimi's horror movies before agreeing to star in Drag Me to Hell, but she was quickly caught up on them, and had even watched Evil Dead 2 5 times by the start of filming. She was especially drawn to that one because it seemed similar to the approach that Raimi was taking with his new film. The tone, the blend of humor and comedy, and she knew that she was essentially the Bruce Campbell of Drag Me to Hell. Although she felt that she couldn't come close to Campbell, who she described as being absolutely brilliant, Campbell knew very well how much joy Raimi gets out of tormenting his actors, and Lohman quickly learned the hard way. From the moment that Christine rejects Mrs. Ganush's request for an extension, the movie is all about putting her through the ringer, and that meant that Lohman had to be put through it too. Christine is tossed around rooms, flung through the air. She has a crazy physical confrontation with Mrs. Ganush. She gets caught in a flooding grave. She's splattered with gore, slime, and vomit. There's a scene where she even gets a nosebleed, and in the script it was just a regular nosebleed, drips of blood. On set, however, Raimi decided to make it spray. He also decided that they should film a moment where Christine gets a mouthful of maggots and worms, which meant Lohman getting a mouthful of those things. Filming was so intense that the actress had a breakout of shingles. She definitely put everything that she had into this production, and it paid off. Lohman carries this movie on her shoulders and does a great job of playing Christine. As Raimi described, she is a morally bankrupt character. She makes bad choices. She risks losing the audience completely when she tries to break the curse by sacrificing her kitten. When she finds out that she could pass the curse to someone else, she goes to a diner and considers giving the cursed button to random strangers. We may not like Christine as a person, but Lohman makes her fascinating to watch. And as bad as the character is, she might not deserve to be dragged straight to hell for it. Several of the trials that Christine endures are reminiscent of something you'd see in an Evil Dead movie, like when she locks herself in a room, but the demon can still grab her by sending its shadow under the door, or when she's attacked by a living handkerchief. That's definitely something that you can imagine Bruce Campbell having to deal with. Some of the action is so cartoony, it almost reaches Army of Darkness levels. For example, there's the fact that Christine has an anvil hanging on a rope in her shed, and when the violent, angry image of the old woman appears to her, she drops the anvil on her head. It is straight out of Looney Tunes. The most Evil Dead scene in the movie is a seance. They're going to summon the spirit of the Lamia. It will possess Sandina, and they're going to pass it into the body of a goat, and then kill the goat to banish the demon. Of course, things don't work out as planned, but it's a treat for Evil Dead fans. When the demon enters human bodies, their voices and behavior become reminiscent of Deadites. And when it enters the goat, we get to see a talking animal call Christine a black-hearted whore. The Evil Dead franchise had been dormant for 16 years by the time that Raimi made Drag Me to Hell, so to see him working with material like this again in 2009 was such a delight. Unfortunately, the movie didn't make quite as much of an impact at the box office as it was expected to. It had a $15 million opening weekend and quickly gained the reputation of being a financial disappointment. When trying to figure out why Drag Me to Hell wasn't more successful, some have pointed at the rating. They assumed that horror fans skipped it because it was rated PG-13. They felt betrayed by Raimi since the first two Evil Deads had been released unrated, and Army of Darkness only earned an R rating after being cut down from an NC-17. But the fact that Army of Darkness had ratings trouble is ridiculous. That movie feels like a PG-13 film.
Lady, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store.
And while Drag Me to Hell feels like it takes place in the Evil Dead world, it's a different kind of story. It didn't need to be any darker or bloodier than it is. And really, it didn't do that poorly at the box office. The worldwide numbers ended up passing $90 million by the end of its theatrical run. Sure, it wasn't a massive hit, but it wasn't a failure either. Anyway, it was always designed to be a standalone story, so it's not like we missed out on a sequel, regardless of how well it did or didn't do. The important thing here is that Raimi had returned to horror, and he did so with a movie that is a whole lot of fun to watch. More than a decade after it reached theaters, it still holds up as a highly entertaining blend of horror and comedy, and is a great showcase for Alison Lohman. It's a shame that this turned out to be one of her last roles, for now at least. Lohman basically retired from acting when she got married in 2009. Since Drag Me to Hell, she's only appeared in a few movies that were either directed or produced by her husband, Mark Neveldine. She has, understandably, been focused on her family, but here's hoping that we'll see a Lohman comeback sometime down the line. Someone else that we need to see more work from is Sam Raimi. Months after Drag Me to Hell was released, Spider-Man 4 fell apart, and since the collapse of that project, we've only seen 2 more Raimi films, Oz the Great and Powerful, and the Doctor Strange sequel. He has been busy as a producer, however. He recently revived the Evil Dead franchise with Evil Dead Rise. He gave us 3 seasons of Bruce Campbell fighting Deadites on the small screen, but the world needs more films that are as stylish and gleefully amusing as Raimi's movies tend to be. Drag Me to Hell is all of those things. It's a uniquely Sam Raimi bit of fun. Or, as he himself described it, it's a spook-a-blast.